next week, on Saturday, we have the very big Franklin Square Fall Festival, Red Park. A lot of good stuff, games for kids, food, DJ. So if you can make it to that event, we'd love to see you all there next week on Saturday. So without any more ado, I'm happy to introduce Laura Gillen, who's our town supervisor. I'm sure you all came to ask her good questions and listen to what she has to say. So thank you for coming, Laura.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for coming out today. I appreciate your participation. So I'm here because I ran for supervisor on a platform of making the town government more accessible and more accountable to residents. And part of the way we do that is by making it more transparent. Because if you can see how contracts are awarded, and if you can see how your taxpayer dollars are being spent, then you can be your own watchdog and make sure that things are happening properly in town hall. So again, transparency being the focus was also a primary focus when I was crafting the budget. As CEO of the town, it's my responsibility in conjunction with the Controller's Office to prepare the budget for each year going forward in the town. And doing that, I wanted to really open the process and make it as transparent as possible. In July, when we were really beginning the nitty-gritty work and starting to craft this budget, I reached out to every council member and invited them, which is something that I understood hadn't happened before. I invited them to all let me know if there were issues in their districts and if they wanted to be a part of the process. In addition to that, I also, in the process of, I reached out to every single commissioner and every single department head. Now, I'm not sure if you're all aware of this, but the commissioners who are in place and the department heads who are in place are all people who were appointed by the prior administration or the one before that. So they were either appointed by my predecessor or by Kate Murray. And so I don't check people's party registrations, but I understand, I think most of them are Republicans. I'm a Democrat. I don't think that should really matter in local government. The issues that we deal with on a day-to-day basis are nonpartisan. It's delivering the best services we can for residents. So to collaboratively and in a bipartisan way, we work together for many months. This is April Smith, who is my Director of Finance. She was formerly, before I was lucky enough to steal her for our benefit in the town of Hempstead, she was the controller in North Hempstead, which, by the way, has one of the highest bond ratings of any municipality. So that's April Smith. We're very lucky to have her. So we worked collaboratively for many months to craft the budget that I presented and filed on September 28th. So again, transparency, opening up the process and the budgeting process. This is the first time ever that the tentative budget has ever been posted online. Historically, this is something that hasn't happened. I wanted to get the data and the information out to residents as soon as possible so you could see what my plans were and have as much time as possible to review the budget, to review what we were thinking before the budget hearing, which is now scheduled for October 23rd. It's the first time the audited financials have ever been posted online in the town of Hempstead. Previously, if you wanted audited financials, you had to FOIL for them. We have a gentleman in the back, Felix Procacci, who has FOIL for them, and sometimes even if you FOIL for them, you couldn't get them. Right, Felix?
Yeah, they're all on my website from 1993.
Yes, so Felix has historically FOIL for them, he's posted them, but the town itself has never posted them. This is important because what is a budget? A budget is really just a projection. It's a best guess based on the numbers that we've seen and trends that we've seen of how much money we're going to spend and we're going to need in the year going forward. But the audited financials are the measure of how much money did we actually spend. Did we go over budget? Did we go under budget? Were we right in line with what we thought? So it's a way for you to measure how your town is performing under its budget. So that's why you shouldn't have to FOIL for that. I don't think so. So that's why I put them up online, the most recent audited financials. It's the first time that a supervisor has gone on the road to bring the budget to the people. These are your tax dollars that are being spent. I think you have the right to know. Sometimes it's difficult to get to town board meetings. You know, most of them are at 10:30 on a Tuesday. The budget hearing does have two components. There will be a hearing at 2 o'clock and a hearing at 7 o'clock to try to make it easier for residents to get there. But I think this is such an important thing. This is how your tax dollars will be spent going over the next year, that I went out to every councilmanic district to bring the budget to the people so they can understand what goes into the budget and how the process worked. More detailed information. So in creating this budget or working on the budget, in the past there have been like lines with lump sums, and there wasn't a lot of clarity of what these lump sums represented. For example, there would be a line called salaries and wages, and there would be a big number, but you didn't know what made up that number. So where we could, we tried to provide more detail. So for salaries and wages, now you'll see the number, but then you'll see beneath it full-time employees, part-time employees, seasonal employees, overtime costs. So you can see all the different components that make up that lump sum. Similarly, there used to be a line called what is it? Fees and services, and it would be again a big lump sum. So fees and services, now we're trying to break that down into different itemized portions. So legal fees, consulting fees, engineering fees, whatever the respective fees are that give rise to that big number, we've broken it down for you just to give you a little bit more information on exactly where this money is going. So some strides we've taken in 2018 since I came into office. First thing I wanted to do, one of the first things I wanted to do was to take care of our debt situation. I came into office and our financial advisors reached out to me and told me that they had been reaching out to the prior administration. As you will recall, in 2017 we were experiencing really incredibly low interest rates, which is a great thing. And by the time we were rolling into 2018, everyone in the finance community kind of was aware that, you know, the good days were probably going to change soon and interest rates were going to start to rise again. Prior to the end of the end of 2017, our financial advisors in the town had reached out to my predecessor and said, you need to refinance your debt. Not only do you have really low interest rates right now, there's going to be a change in the tax law that will take effect on January 1st. And what that change will mean for the town of Hempstead is, and every town across America, is that a municipality will no longer be able to refinance all their debt. So we wouldn't be able to take advantage of the lower interest rates for all our debt. You would only be able to refinance a limited portion of your debt, only debt that was coming current. So they kept advising, you have to do this now, do this before the end of the year. The prior administration did nothing. That failure to act cost taxpayers roughly $5 million. A lost opportunity. So when I got into office and I became aware of this, I said, let's do what we can. We may have lost that opportunity, but let's not lose another opportunity. So I put forward a resolution to refinance whatever debt we could, because we did have debt coming current in the spring. This is back in January. And I said, let's empower the controller that if the interest rates are lower than the interest rate we're paying, let's empower him so he can refinance our debt. The board passed the resolution. We refinanced the debt. The result is a savings of about $2 million to taxpayers, because we were able to get that lower interest rate. Multi-year capital plan. So this is the first time the board has passed a multi-year capital plan. This is a great tool that's used in private business all the time to kind of forecast where you're going. It's a roadmap, essentially. So we reached out to all our commissioners of all our various departments and said, let us know what capital projects you'd like to undertake over the next 5 years. So we met with them, we went through their whole list of capital projects, we prioritized which ones were most important, we decided these are the ones that we think we need to do over the next 5 years, this is when we need to accomplish them, and this is how we're going to pay for them. So it just gives us a forecast to think ahead and look, where do we want to be in 5 years, and how are we going to get there financially. And that's also posted on our website, so you can go and read the capital plan to see what projects are included and aren't included. And if you think there's something we missed, you can let us know. ERP contracted for an integrated financial system. So basically what this means is we're bringing in a new software system to do a complete overhaul of how we do accounting, payroll, and human resources functions in the town of Hempstead. It was very much needed. This process was already in place before I got elected. It was already in the works. And in fact, when I got into office, I was presented with a proposed contract that we were going to put before the board to vote on, selecting a particular vendor, to do this work and to initiate this overhaul of these payroll accounting functions. I was concerned because this is a very big contract, a multi-million-dollar contract, about $12 million. And my concern was that there was not enough competition. I didn't know about how this vendor was selected. I wasn't involved. And with a contract of that size, I wanted to make sure that there was ample competition and negotiation before giving out this big contract. So I slowed down the process. I brought all the vendors who had applied through the RFP back in. We had a bipartisan panel listening to all their presentations again. We had competition again. We renegotiated with all the vendors again. And the result is that because we slowed down that process and didn't just give the contract, we got cut $2 million off the price. So same vendor was selected, but for $2 million less. Town app and website. So for the first time ever in the town of Hempstead, we have an app. You can download it to your phone or to your tablet, and it's just another way you can get information from the town. You can watch board meetings, you can file a complaint or an issue or a concern with our helpline, you can find out about sanitation pickup. All the information that you can find on our town website, you can now find on your handheld device. And we also revitalized the whole website, revamped it, redesigned it, tried to make it more user-friendly, tried to put more information on it. And the good news is all of this was done in-house with staff that I hired to be on my staff. They did all of this, so there was no additional cost to taxpayers for this work. Previously, in years gone by, we had an outside consultant in California who was doing our website. Our website was toh.li. We found out that LI actually stood for, I think, Lithuania. So we were using a Lithuanian domain. We changed it, and now it's hempsteadnewyork.gov. So we have a .gov website. We brought it back to the USA, and we're slowly weaning users off the Hempstead toh.li website, and then we will not be using the services of the consultant in California again. So that's a cost that will no longer be borne by taxpayers. Energy performance contracts. So we put an RFP out. We brought in a consultant who's taking a look at all our energy costs throughout the town. You know, we have many facilities, parks, other facilities throughout the town. And they're looking at how much money we spend on electricity and on gas. And this is at no cost to taxpayers. They get paid out of the savings that they find for us on the other end. So the taxpayers aren't paying anything for this. And we're waiting to see what the results are. When that evaluation is done, we'll of course let you know on the website. Competitive bidding for professional services. So historically in the town of Hempstead, if you were a lawyer, law firm, engineer, consultant, the various department heads could just give out contracts to all their friends and family. At a town board meeting that I attended, I don't know who asked the question, it might have been Mr. Pikachi, someone asked the town attorney, well, what law firms do you use and how do you select these law firms? And he was like, well, I just picked them. I just picked the law firms. And so there was no open and competitive process to pick these professional service providers. So there was no guarantee that there was any competition or that we were getting the best bang for our dollar, for our taxpayer dollar. So I wanted to change that because it shouldn't be like insider, you have to be connected to get that kind of work from the town of Hempstead. Anybody should be able to get that work. So I put forward a resolution to change that process so that there was open and competitive process. Any law firm who wants to do business with the town of Hempstead could put in a response. We're going to put out an RFQ, which is a request for qualifications. Any law firm, any engineer, any consultant can put in, accountant can put in their response, put in their body of work, and they will be reviewed by a bipartisan panel that will consist of the relative department heads. For example, if it's a law firm, or someone from our town attorney's office would be on the panel, and we make sure on the panel there's always representatives from the town board majority and the town board minority, so that both political parties are represented. So it's a really true, fair evaluation that goes on when we have people respond to RFPs or RFQs, and eventually by 2019 we will have a list of qualified vendors that will get then selected through an open and transparent process. Michelle, I'm sorry. My water, yes. Sorry, I'm losing my voice a little bit. And just add a little bit, I put forward the resolution to change this process, and the town board tabled it, and they wouldn't vote in favor of it. So, in response, I told Newsday I published in Newsday the legal fees for the town of Hempstead, and they found that there were 3 main firms that got all the business from the town of Hempstead. And the #1 firm that got the business was Joe Mondello, who was the party boss's firm, and they got paid over $1.5 million in a little over a year. So then the board kind of changed their mind, and they supported the resolution. So other things that we've done internally to try to keep costs down for taxpayers is overtime approval. In the past, a commissioner could just sign off on overtime for his department with no further scrutiny. So we have now required that any overtime has to be approved by the supervisor's office. Similar with payroll and not payroll. I'm sorry, hiring, promotions, and raises. All of those now have to be approved by the supervisor's office. Not because we don't think there are employees who are deserving of raises, of course there are, but we want to make sure a couple of things. 1, there's enough money in the budget for that. 2, if the person's getting promoted, it's being promoted to a title that actually exists. 3, that there's a vacancy in that title. If it's a tested position, we want to make sure that the person is one of the people who scored at the highest for that tested position. Just little safeguards to make sure the right person is getting promoted and that we have the money to afford it. Purchases over $5,000. Again, department heads and commissioners used to be able to just sign off on $10,000, $15,000 purchases. We put an end to that. Any purchase over $5,000 has to be approved by the supervisor's office. Discretionary mail. You may have noticed that you're getting a lot less mail from the town of Hempstead this year. I thought that the amount of mail that I received last year was obscene. Almost every week, a piece of mail coming from the town of Hempstead about things like get a passport, you can get a dog license. Each of those mailers costs like $40,000. So just by limiting the mail to date, we've saved about $400,000 of your money. So these are some of the improvements that are in the plans for 2019. These are streets. This is a list of streets that are going to be repaved. That's 2019. You got it?
Can you go back? Yeah, just looking for one particular street, I don't see it. Cheryl Boulevard.
Cheryl Boulevard.
That's
This is in the back. This gentleman, raise your hand, is Joe Davenport. He is my deputy in charge of infrastructure, so he oversees our highway department, our sanitation department, our water department. So, and just so for background, Joe before I was lucky enough to bring him into the town of Hempstead, he was worked with the county. He's a sanitary engineer. He has 28 years of experience. He's a real asset to the town. So you can follow up with Joe on that street.
Also, just a point of reference on that last slide, that's mostly for the 2nd councilmanic district. Some of you might be in the 3rd councilmanic district.
It's a long one. I don't know which part.
We'll get the answer.
I just know that we had sent a letter from the Civic and we're supposed to get it as soon as possible.
Okay, so we'll check on that. All right, so moving into the budgeting process. As I said, it's a balancing act. So what we did was we reached out, as I alluded before, to each of the different commissioners and department heads and said, come on in, let's talk about everything you want going forward into 2019, everything you want for your department. And then we have to go through that and call out what do you really need, because everything is bearing in mind the tax burden to the residents, to all of you. So we took their wish list, we kind of carved it down a little bit, and through that process, that's how we came to the 2019 budget. Again, input from every town department, so it was a bipartisan document, and increased transparency. I'm here to tell you how this process unfolded. I invited in the council members to be a part of the process, and we're here to answer to you because it's your money that's being spent. So where does your money go? If you live in an unincorporated area of the town, for every dollar you spend, tax dollar you spend, only 9 cents of that actually goes to the town of Hempstead. And if you live in an incorporated village, only 2 cents of that goes to the town of Hempstead. So we like to think that we are giving you a good bang for your buck for your 9 cents or 2 cents. These are the expenses that generally go into the budget. You'll see the majority of our expenses is salaries. So salaries this year are $169.5 million. That's down from last year was $173 million were budgeted. Refuse disposal is a big part of it. Debt service, pensions, health insurance, workers' comp, consultants, and social security taxes. And then there's just a little miscellaneous 13% is other. So these are some of the expenses that we as a town have to absorb every single year. There's no discretion involved. The first one is an employee cost of living increase. That is going up this year by $4.8 million. Most of our employees are union employees. Pursuant to our collective bargaining agreement, there is a contractual step increase for them. And so that's what goes into, that's the majority of that number, the cost of living increase. And we are bound as a township contractually to give that increase each year. Healthcare increases. So as you all know, healthcare is a skyrocketing cost. Our costs go up every year as a municipality. So our health, in order to provide health insurance, we're seeing a $3.5 million increase in our health insurance. Utility tax settlement. So you may have been aware that a couple of years ago, all the various utilities sued Nassau County and the towns in Nassau County, claiming that they were incorrectly assessed on a number of their items like utility poles and things like that. So there was a lawsuit filed. It was in litigation for a while. The prior administration, so my predecessor, during his administration, they decided to settle the case in conjunction with Nassau County. Other towns did not settle. North Hempstead has not settled the case, to my knowledge, to date. They have not settled the case. I'm not sure about Oyster Bay, but the town of Hempstead and the county decided to do this joint settlement, and the terms of that settlement agreement required that the town of Hempstead had to pay out the judgment up front, and then the county would pay us back over 10 years. The rub is that we had to borrow all the money to pay out this judgment, so we have to pay, a town has to pay interest on it, but the county does not have to pay us any interest. The cost of that settlement is $8.2 million per year. Can't avoid it. Workers' comp, we have to provide workers' comp insurance, and we have workers' comp claims filed us, we pay out on claims, so those are workers' comp costs. Incorporated in this $2 million figure is an $800,000 expense, which is a one-time expense, and that one-time expense is to digitize our records. Early on in my administration, one of my deputies reached out to our workers' comp because I said I want to get an idea of how many claims we have pending and what our exposure is on all our workers' comp claims. And he called our service provider and asked those questions, and they couldn't answer because they don't use computers. Hearing that, I said, pull the contract. How can we be doing business with a vendor who can't even answer these basic questions? So we pulled the contract, and it turns out that the last time this contract went out for bid was 1975.
When there were no computers.
1975. So you'll be glad to know that we put it out for RFP, and we will be bringing in a new service provider who does use computers. We're in the process of, I think we have two final contestants. And, but because everything is on paper, we have to scan all those records and digitize all those records. So that's going to be a one-time fee, but it's a worthwhile investment because it will enable our service provider to administer our claims more efficiently and more accurately. Other costs. You may have read that at the last town board meeting of my predecessor, right before I got into office, he made approximately 190 personnel moves. 30 of those were required moves. They were part-time employees who were required pursuant to a legal settlement to be made full-time. So 30 of those were okay. But what he also did was took every person in, almost every person in his office and the supervisor staff and in the town clerk's office, because those are the two elected officials who lost their election, and buried them in the town of Hempstead. Generally, elections have consequences. If you lose an election, you leave and your staff goes with you and you find new jobs. But that's not what happened at the close of 2017. The budget had been adopted in October of 2017. So then all these people who just got put into payroll, there was no budget. There was no budget for their salary. So they dumped $2 million of salary into the payroll that hadn't been anticipated. So I walked in on day one and my budget was out of balance. Community college settlement is, there was litigation with FIT. FIT is considered a community college because we as a township send some of our residents to FIT. We are required to contribute to FIT each year, depending on the number of students that we send there. This year we had an increase of $2.7 million that we need to send to FIT on top of what we already send to FIT. So, bearing these costs in mind, how do we keep expenses under control? Going forward into 2019, we will have 50 fewer employees than we had budgeted in 2018. So we'll have 1,845 full-time employees. We did this simply through attrition, just not hiring people back as people left, and not filling vacancies that we thought didn't need to be filled. So nobody was fired to get to this number. We also are projecting a 7% reduction in overtime labor, and a 6% reduction in part-time and seasonal labor. I talked about this already, slashing mail costs. We saved about $400,000 to date by not sending out all this mail. And I will say that, we can go back to mail. I will say that I have heard from some residents that they would like to see a little bit more mail, maybe a little bit more about events. We've been trying to send out mail for events, but trying to send it out, instead of sending you 4 pieces of mail about upcoming events, we'll put them, try to consolidate 1 or 2 of them on 1 piece of mail. Again, just bearing in mind the cost to taxpayers of sending out this mail. So we're still trying to gauge what's the right amount of mail, so any feedback you have is appreciated. I know not everybody looks to a website, but I want to send out as little mail as I can, but yet keep you informed. So the result of all these months of working on this budget is that overall there will be a net reduction of 1.88% for 83% of homeowners and residents. So if you are a homeowner in the town of Hempstead, you should see a small reduction in what you actually pay to the town of Hempstead. There are only small increases between $5 and $19 for 17% of residents, and those are residents who are living in specific areas of the town, because in that area they have special districts that they contribute to, they pay taxes to, and in those special districts there were improvements. I don't think any of them are in this, none of them are in this district. No, none of them are in this councilmanic district, so that's nobody here in this, well, unless you live in one of the other districts. On the horizon, things that we incorporated in our budget for projects going forward in 2019. Camp Anchor. So I don't know if you're familiar with Camp Anchor. It's a camp that provides recreational activities and educational activities for people with special needs, just children and adults. We have a huge waiting list for Camp Anchor. It's a wonderful place. It's a great resource for families living in our town who have members who have special needs. So I wanted to be able to take some more kids off the waiting list, or adults off the waiting list, and let them have the opportunity to participate in Camp Anchor. So we've devoted funding to buy more tents, or put up more tents, more buses, and hire a little bit additional staff to work at camp so we can take in more campers this year. That's great because we have a lot of residents who would like to work at Camp Anchor, who are teachers and special ed teachers who would like to work there. We have a long waiting list also for volunteers who want to work there. So now we'll be able to take more of your children in as volunteers to volunteer at Camp Anchor, and again, make this resource available to more of our families. Investment in our aging infrastructure. I'm not sure if you read Newsday, you may have seen the story about how we still have 72 typewriters in the town of Hempstead. We are still running our clerk's office on typewriters. I was shocked when I came in. I wanted to immediately put all current contracts online so you could see all the contracts and see what the terms are. But when I asked to see that data, I was led to a filing room with everything, a giant room, probably about this size, just filled with paper. So pretty much the town of Hempstead is run on paper. I want to change that. I want to bring us into the digital age. I was fortunate enough, again, another person that I hired as my chief technology officer is a gentleman named Ari McKenzie. He came from the private sector, and he is helping us transform the town of Hempstead and bring us along this journey into the digital age. Why is this important? It's important because it will provide you more realistic information. It'll allow the town to operate more efficiently and more productively once we do this. For example, some of the things we're going to do, we're going to change our town clerk's office. We have a program called Novus Agenda that I'm hoping the board will pass. Everything that I'm saying, we have to have it passed by the board. But that will enable the clerk's office to get away from the typewriters, to have a consistent format on how they put forward resolutions and how they publish that resolutions, and we'll be able to publish resolutions in searchable format, something that is very important to many residents who read them, because this way you'll be able, yes, Mr. Bacacci, this way you'll be able to search. If there's a particular item you want to read about, or a resolution that you care about, you can search for it and you don't have to read through, scroll through pages and pages of documents. So it'll make the clerk's office operate more efficiently. Also, our town attorney's office. I'm an attorney. Before I was a supervisor, I was an attorney in private practice, practicing commercial litigation. When I went into our town attorney's office, I said, what case management system do you use? And they don't have one. So we have hundreds of lawsuits. And I said, what do you do with discovery when it comes in, which is the materials that you exchange with the other side? And they have a box of papers under their desk. I don't want our attorneys to operate that way. I don't want them to have boxes of papers. Too many things can get lost if there's boxes of papers. I want everything to move to be digitized because it'll be easier for us to manage our caseload. Just a public safety feature. One of the things that we're looking at right now, and we're hoping that we're going to implement in the short term, is if you have a parking district, a commuter parking lot, you go to the town, you buy a little permit to park in that lot. You get a sticker and you put it on your car. Well, right now, when we have our public safety officers go to enforce to make sure that people actually have permits to park in the lot, they pull up, they park, and they get out and they walk. And they walk from car to car, and they check and walk. Huge waste of time. What we're going to do is we're going to implement a system where when you get your permit, it's linked to your license plate. Public safety officers can just drive through and scan the license plates and know right away whether or not somebody has a permit or somebody doesn't. This will save an incredible amount of time and enable our public safety officers to do other things besides walk around parking lots all day. They can do it in a matter of minutes, what used to take much longer than that. We're going to replace our aging infrastructure, our servers. Right now we've had a problem in the town of Hempstead where certain of our technology programs have been down. Our software systems have been down, and they've been down for about a month. And the reason it takes so long to get things repaired is because our software systems are so old, there are very few people who actually know how to service them. We use an email platform called GroupWise. The last time my chief technology officer migrated a client from GroupWise to Microsoft Office in the private sector was 2000. We don't have Wi-Fi in the town of Hempstead. We're going to bring Wi-Fi to the town of Hempstead. So these are some of the improvements that we are investing in and some of the money that has been earmarked in the 2019 budget as well as in our capital plan. The water testing lab. So we have a great Department of Conservation and Resources in the town. They're fabulous. We have amazing scientists doing really good things down there. And one of the things that we had, an asset of the town, was a water testing lab. After Superstorm Sandy, it got damaged, it was shuttered, closed, and was kind of left since that time. The prior administration had made a decision to permanently close the lab and to sell all the equipment. We have a lot of valuable equipment there, and they were going to sell it for pennies on the dollar. After I got elected, people reached out to me and made me aware of this issue and made me aware of the importance of lab and the asset that it could be to Long Island. And once I got into office, I was able to change course. We dedicated money in the capital plan to reopen the lab, which is going to be a great resource, not just for the town of Hempstead, but for Long Island, because it will enable us to test the water quality and monitor the water quality of all the waterways surrounding the town and throughout Long Island, our back bays as well. This is important because not only is our waterways and our beaches very important for recreation, they're also really important to support local businesses, and it's going to be an asset for the region. We've received praise from the Citizens Campaign for the Environment and the Long Island Region Planning Council as this is an important step to help promote the future health of Long Island. It also presents a great opportunity for nearby universities. We've been contacted by Hofstra University and by Stony Brook University already. They're really excited about us reopening the lab. They want to be a part of the process. They think this is going to be a great educational resource for some of their students. And so this will have a benefit for us as well as a township, because we'll have members of academia coming into our labs and providing an asset to our labs at no cost to taxpayers. We also have funds earmarked to create a new emergency/311 center. Historically through the town, communications can be bifurcated. We found this in the first snowstorm when I took office, that calls would come into the helpline, some people would call the commissioner, some people would call the council person. Calls could come in about an issue all over the place, and by the time they got to where they needed to be to provide a timely response, a lot of time could have elapsed. Not because anybody doesn't want to respond, but because there's just a slowdown in communications. We want to centralize communications with the town so we can respond to citizens' concerns in a more timely fashion. So the 311 component will be the everyday concern. I have a pothole, I'm concerned about something going on at my neighbor's house, this park has a light out, it needs to be fixed, or can you please come and see about, maybe improving this at the park? Think issues like that, routine issues. The emergency center is for when there's a storm, when there's a snowstorm, or other kind of emergency event, that all communications will go there. All the relevant personnel to respond to that event will be centralized in one location so that there's a uniform center of activity giving directions to the various departments of the town on how they should respond to whatever the situation is. So the results of all this work going into the 2019 budget is that the majority of homeowners will see a small reduction in their taxes. It's not huge, but you know what? Going down is better than going up. But this is all while preserving all of our resources and all of our programming and all the services that we provide. We have not cut any departments, we've not cut any programs. Everything has remained in place, but yet we were able to lower taxes for most homeowners. And we've been also able to invest in our town's future safety with the 311 center and with our lab, and enhance some programs like Hemp Anchor. So that's it. Does anybody have any questions?
Well, like every 15 to 20 seconds that you spoke, either a question or a comment came to mind.
Okay.
And that's all I can do to keep my mouth shut. And this is not going to do it for me. Is there some other way that I can reach out to you with issues?
Sure. I mean, you can reach out to my office. We can give you a card. And, if you want to ask the question now, otherwise you can just...
No, I just go on and on at the big pages.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll give you, you can see one of these gentlemen and they'll give you a card and you can call it, you can call us. Yes,
I have
ma'am.
a few questions, unlike him, I want to ask them now.
Okay.
First of all, the reduction in staff, were the people that were put on temporary and permanent positions by Santino, were they among the people, or they are safe where they are?
No, they were all put into union protected positions, so they're all safe. The reduction in the staff was
Through attrition?
it was just through attrition, and also there were some vacancies that we're just not filling.
As far as the contracts with the unions, aren't they reviewed every few years? I mean, the cost of living is higher than the cost of living.
Right.
Is that a fixed number, or can that change with future negotiations?
So April Smith, I'm gonna let her get into a little bit more of the detail about the cost of living increase, but I will, to answer the first part of your question, the contract with the union was negotiated in July of 2017. And so that was when it was executed, that was when it was agreed to, and it's a 5-year contract. So it will not be renegotiated until the end of that 5-year term. You know, many of you may be aware of the lawsuit that I filed because the union was amended, the town board voted to amend the union contract to grant a broad no layoff provision so that no one can ever be laid off, even in times of economic crisis, unless there was cause. And in the union world, to terminate someone for cause is very difficult. I have no plans to like go fire a bunch of people, but I think that that no layoff clause was just given to try to harm my administration, and it was a very bad deal for the taxpayers. So that's what that lawsuit is about, to just try to undo that amendment to the CBA agreement. But otherwise, the CBA agreement that's in place will be in effect for 5 years.
Right. Yes, you talked about unnecessary mailings. The tax reminder, why do people have to be reminded to pay their taxes?
Is that
To
coming
me,
from
it
Mr.
seems like a
Clayton's
waste of
office?
time. You get a reminder on top of your actual billing. You get a reminder, why? To me, you said there was a saving of $400,000.
Yeah.
I think that's totally unnecessary. People should be responsible enough to know when they have to pay their taxes.
That is, that comes from Mr. Claven's office, so I have not really interfered with any of his mail because he would say I'm trying to violate his rights. But I can certainly pass that comment along because I do agree with you.
And my final question has to do with Grant Park. There are numerous issues at Grant Park, and whenever we're complaining about, we're told, well, do you want your taxes to go up? The budget for the park district is $4 million. How can we find out where this $4 million goes?
So that is a big issue that we're working on right now. Mr. Procacci has raised that issue with us, and April has been talking about this issue. Do you want to speak a little bit to that, April?
Sure. The Parks District as a whole, I'll speak broadly to the operations.
The mic?
Yeah, no, I understand that it's more than just a pool, but it's still $4 million.
No, the Parks District has an operating arm where all of the salaries for the people who are working in Draft Park or any of the other parks in your special district, they're all centralized in what we call the operating. Sorry. Sorry. Can you hear me? Okay. So what happens is there's an administrative charge in your budget. Is that the amount you're referring to?
I'm talking to the budget. I'm talking about the budget versus why certain things are not addressed. And the stock and trade answer is, do you want your taxes to go up? If we're paying so much and the budget is $4 million, why should we be told this can't be done? We have a situation with broken cement. 3 different people have fallen and have sued. Nothing is done. And it's just, I'm not looking
So
for...
okay, so the numbers for your special parks district comes
Yes.
from 2 sources, the operations of your park and the general fund portion, which is the basis by which the controller's office cut the checks for all of that. All of that gets computed into your amount for running your district. If you're looking for investments, like things that we need to bond for, those are specifically, and so that yes, if there's a project that the Parks District is looking to have done, that would be an additional amount. And right now, typically we have the expenses and the revenues, which is the taxes that you're paying, we make those equal. So to the extent you're having new investments, it will take more taxes. However, I do know that because of the activities of Mr. Procacci, we're looking at the bodies that are actually in the district to see if they make sense. So it's not reflected right now in the budget that's before you because it's a process. We are going to be looking at the staffing of your special district. I think right now it's about 30 people. Maybe it's sufficient, maybe it's too many. I don't know. We're going to look at that holistically throughout the parking, Parks District. We have a lot of different special districts. So that's where it's coming from. It's actual bodies working there, plus the cost of the general fund, which is the controller's office, the legal department, and things like that.
And I Wasn't there some concern about, I think there was a concern about how that was being reflected, if there was enough transparency about what was going into the budget there,
Yeah.
right? And historically, there was very little information about what was in the budget there. It was kind of a big, mysterious thing. So we are working together. This was something that Mr. Papachi brought to our attention and others brought to our attention. So AREL is working together to try to make sure that going forward, we can't tell you in the past because I think the records are not, they're not there.
It's not there.
They're not there. There's no records. There's just a number and there's no records. So we can't tell you about the past, but we can tell you that going forward, we want to be transparent. We want you to know where your money's going. And that's the issue that Ms. Smith was speaking about, that there are a certain number of bodies that are supposed to be in that park. And we want to make sure that if you're paying for them, that they're actually in the park or in your district doing what they're supposed to be doing and they're not being sent somewhere else and you're paying for services elsewhere. That is something that we've been made aware of and it's something that we're looking into.
And finally, I'd like to say thank you very much for being where you are.
Thank you.
If I could, just some of the things you spoke to, which just seems so obvious to many of us, but clearly weren't happening. If people have fallen on a cracked cement, and it's happened several times,
Yes.
the fact that there's not interagency communication is a function of lack of communication because there's no technology to say, boy, we have two claims here at the same location. Has anybody fixed fixed something simple like put down, $150 worth of concrete to repair it? And that, so those sort of issues, and again, the 311 could respond to that. And there's so many obvious things that are addressed in your budget management here, and really, again, like many, I appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. And just in terms of even our modernizing our town attorney's office, we get slip and fall cases all the time. So when we have a case management system in place, and I will tell you that my chief technology officer, who is helping us make this transformation, he's someone that I worked with in the legal world, and so that's really his area of expertise. So we can bring in a system where when we have all these personal injuries, slip and fall cases, we can track things like that to see, are we getting sued for like the same area over and over again? Oh my gosh, that has to rise to the top priority, or we have to put in emergency funding, reserve funds to fix this area. Yes, sir.
Yeah, actually, I have many questions, but I'll concentrate on two of them.
Okay.
One, what will guarantee us that the snow plowing fiasco from this past winter will not repeat itself coming not a month from now, maybe 2 months? I had a very bad experience. I'm sure they'll be able to update you. We felt that the town, under your supervision, brought us.
Okay.
And it was basically excuses, stories, zero action.
Okay, well, I totally disagree with you in terms of zero action. We came in on the fourth day of my administration, there was a major, major snowstorm. And we sat all our commissioners who respond to snow emergencies, our highway commissioner, our parks commissioner, our sanitation commissioner, we said, okay, do exactly what you've always done in the past, and so we can monitor and we can see how you respond to snow emergencies and we can evaluate it. And this is my deputy, Joe Davenport, who oversees all our infrastructure. And so Joe Davenport, during that whole snowstorm, sat in the highways office and evaluated everything that happened, where things went wrong and where things didn't go wrong, and what worked and what didn't work. And as a result of that, he did a snow audit. And he saw that one of the big problems we had was this problem with communications. So to say we did nothing, we did something on day 4. We did something. And we improved our snow operations on day 4 because we found that parks, sanitation, and highways all responded to snow, but they all had different areas that they responded to. So you may have the sanitation responding, for example, in one area. For example, in East Rockaway, that's where sanitation was sent. And the problem with that was that at midnight, on the day of that big, big snowstorm, January 4th, I was in town hall because I care very much about, I was not home sleeping, I was in town hall, and I happened to see on Facebook that no streets were being plowed, had been plowed in East Rockaway. So I got in my car with my chief of staff and my press person, who just happened to be around because he was dealing with press issues about the storm, and we drove to East Rockaway to see what's going on with these streets, had they not been plowed. And I found that these streets had not been plowed, and I called the supervisor in charge and I said, get over here and explain to me why these streets haven't been plowed. And he said, well, because we have sanitation trucks and these are all dead ends, and they can't get down the street. Or if they get down the street, then they have to back up, and it's too treacherous, it's white out conditions, and they can't back up. And, okay, first of all, I said that should have been communicated hours ago, but second of all the equipment, the small equipment that could have been dealing with those streets was deployed elsewhere because sanitation only had these big trucks. So immediately, we changed the protocols and we moved equipment because we said you can't just have sanitation equipment dealing with one area and have the smaller equipment like tow trucks dealing with another area. So we changed the allocation of equipment, and in fact, in our capital plan and in our budget, we have devoted lots of funds to buying smaller equipment to make sure that our cul-de-sacs and our dead ends, which were the streets that we found had the most incidents of not getting plowed properly, so that they can be treated, that they can be plowed better going forward. So that's something we've done. We also established a chain of command, which hadn't been done before. We put the highway commissioner at the top of the chain of command. So this way there's an actual formal reporting system, so when there's an issue, it gets reported up ultimately to the highway commissioner, who then will report to Mr. Davenport in my office. So we established this protocol in the snow and storm response operations. And so, Joe, what?
Bringing everyone together.
Oh, and bringing everyone together. So in the past, the highway commissioner was in the highway yard, the parks department, the parks commissioner was in his office, and the sanitation commissioner was in his office. So they were all in 3 different offices, and maybe a call would come in to sanitation, and I think I described this a little bit and why we thought the 311 center would be necessary. Maybe a call would come into sanitation, and then they get the call about an area, but that's not their area, and then something happens, and they're like, oh, who do we have to call? Is it highway? Is it parks? Is it sanitation? Who do we call? And then it takes like an hour for the right department to actually get the information about the street that needs to be plowed. So we changed the protocol that all the commissioners are all in the same location during a storm, and all calls are routed to them at our highway yard, in our highway office, and Joe is always there during any storm emergency, so all the communications are being directed to the same spot, and so we can have a more timely response to them. So we are getting more equipment, we've uniformed, we've compartmentalized and centralized all operations to respond to a storm. I'm sorry you had a bad experience. You can let us know what street you are, and we'll make sure.
Oh, you know, and they know.
I know.
And so that's.
Okay. All right. Yes,
the
sir.
other question I did have, though, I did have a couple. I understand, unless something changed, that the dreaded school zone cameras may be brought to life by another lady who works under you. Laura Curran?
Laura Curran she's the county executive, I'm the town supervisor. So
Okay.
she's in charge of the county, I'm in charge of the town, so that's totally different.
Where do you stand with this? Because this has been a fiasco from the get-go. It has been dropped because of that, because of the public resistance. And now I understand that coming into the town of Hempstead, they're looking to make the superintendents of the schools the deciding factor, whether they're going to come on at that school, at this school, right there and then. But this is all, okay, it's Nassau County, but it's also town of Hempstead. Where do you stand with this? Because this is going to present a phenomenal burden on our pockets and basically makes criminals or lawbreakers out of almost everybody who peacefully coexisted for years and never really accumulated thousands of dollars in traffic tickets. Where do you stand with this? I mean,
well, I have no say in whether or not the county puts in red light cameras, and whether or not the county decides that the superintendent is the deciding factor. That you'll have to take. That's Laura Curran's issue.
I'm talking about school cameras.
That's going to be speed.
That would be speed cameras. Speed cameras. That's the county. The county implemented them under County Executive Mangano. Those went in. I think under County Executive Mangano, then they went out.
That's correct.
So it would be Laura Curran. So I encourage you to go to the legislature, and they would be the ones who would decide that issue.
Would you support it if she decides to do it, or would you put up a fight for it?
I mean, it doesn't really matter what I say. It's a county decision. But I have gotten a lot of those tickets, and I find that they're quite painful to pay. Not a lot. I've got a couple of them. Or
I have a question.
yes.
What does the deficit reduction line mean in the 2018 Franklin Square Park District budget? I'll answer. The town has a fund balance, which is sort of the rainy day guideline. Where in our own private life, we need to have 3 months balance of expenses. So the town has a fund balance policy. And that fund balance policy is a place we're trying to get back. So the deficit reduction is an attempt. If you look in that budget, you'll see we have more revenues budgeted there than the expenses. We are out of compliance in that district, and as a result, in order to bring the fund balance for that special district in line, we have to budget a little bit more revenues there than the expenses in order to bring that balance back in line. We're working on that. There, you know, in this budget, there is roughly, the tentative budget has 8 million of fund balance replenishment for different funds. That's the, do you want to follow up question, Mr. Picasso?
Well, I just want to make sure that everyone understands that, I asked that question, by the way, but in 2018 budget, the Franklin Square Park District, the final budget was 3.9 million, and then they added the revenue, I guess, from pool fees and whatever, and then they had a line item deficit reduction, but it doesn't really explain. They add it together and then say subtract and they get to 4 million. In this year's budget going forward in 2019, the appropriations was increased by almost $300,000, which was about what the deficit reduction was, and then the number came out to be the same. And it's very confusing as to understand why all this math is being done and where these numbers are going. And I think that anyone looking at these budgets and even trying to analyze it from the administrative charge reports, which are supposed to explain this stuff, doesn't really explain what's...
And I'll give you the broad picture of why it's not that easy. The consultant who performs this particular function of analyzing the cost and allocating how much the Parks District, how much of the general fund expenses the Parks District, for example, should absorb, has a methodology of smoothing. I'm going to try to explain this so that if it's determined that $1 million is the difference this year when you compare the budgeted amount to the actual amount, he smooths that over 5 years, so that we're now absorbing 1 year of any of the smoothing for the 2017 actual, and we have one portion of the 2016. That's the methodology. You cannot come in as a new administration and just upend that process. Because if you say, okay, let's just throw up everything, then somebody's going to have a very high adjustment. So we're continuing those methodologies that have been in existence. You just cannot just change certain things. So it's a 5-year smoothing, which is why you're not able to go to the audited statement to say, okay, the difference is 100,000. That's why I should have that, because there's a trailing amount that's in that number.
Yeah, I just want to bring up one more point. What drew me to this initially, going back 4 years ago, was the fact that our budget, the Franklin Square Park District budget in 2008, was only $2 million, and within 10 years, it doubled to $4 million. And I looked at all the highest rate taxes for school districts on Long Island, and we beat everybody. Our park district tax increase has gone up faster than any school district on Long Island, which is the highest in the country. So it's very disturbing to know that we are absorbing more increases than a school district, which typically, has higher rates of increases than anything else.
No, and I appreciate that. I think operationally we will look at that. That is on the agenda for next year. But I want to remind you that my recollection is there were ball fields purchased, which affected your,
I took that into account. It does, the numbers still don't add up, even with the purchases from 2014 when that occurred. Even if you subtract all those ball fields, which was deaded anyway, so you're only paying interest and principal, so it's not added to the bottom line of the budget, and that would be a one-shot deal. The fact is, over time, it has gone up 100%. That's a problem.
We're going to look at the operation, but that would be the only place, and I know we hear you, and it's good that you're sounding the alarm, because we're looking at this holistically. We're not just looking at this for this district.
Okay.
We're looking at it, or that is not for all the districts, to see, make sure everybody's being fairly taxed, because it makes sense.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Before I ask a question, I just want to thank you for bringing transparency.
Thank you.
And I can see your leadership and involvement.
Thank you.
So I feel good.
Thank you.
My question is, I lived in Queens back all my life, and we love it here, but I don't know if it's unnecessary. In Queens, we live like in Bayside, private home, and we get garbage picked up twice a week. Now, we like it here, but I just wonder, why is it 3 times a week? 5 times a week?
5.
Yeah, what is that? I don't understand. It's like a
Good answer.
Five.
I could answer that.
Go ahead.
The town of Hempstead does not control the garbage collection in Franklin Square and Valley Stream. It's Sanitation District 6, and I've gone to their meetings, and they're up on my website, the meetings I've gone to. And the explanation is they claim there's a high amount of garbage that needs to be picked up, and they need, based on the tonnage, that they need 3 days a week, which I don't understand, because what they do is they attribute that to the illegal apartments in Elmont, and this is their words, not mine. Meanwhile, what they do is they still pick up 3 days a week in Franklin Square, even though most people, as you know, whose family is usually around 3, the average according to the statistics, they don't need to do that. I think it's just to have excessive employment and to maintain a large staff. I don't think there's any reason, because that 5-day-a-week pickup is a farce, because like the Thursday where you're supposed to have like the junk pickup day, where if you have non-burnable junk, I gutted my bathroom, so I put all my non-burnable junk out on Wednesday night to be picked up on Thursday. They did not come on Thursday, and this was like probably 6 to 8 feet worth of garbage taking up the curb space. They came on Friday and took it all. The same goes for the Saturday lawn pickup, where I put out my leaves and my grass clippings on a Saturday, Friday night for pickup on Saturday, and those bags sit there the whole weekend, and they come on Monday and pick it up. So it's really...
Commissioner-driven district, right?
It's a commissioner-driven, it has nothing to do with...
They just turn them over to us to pass
Special
along.
district.
The only thing that the town of Hempstead can have a responsibility for, which in the past never has, the town of Hempstead, the comptroller can choose to audit that district, but never has. 10 years ago, the county one time audited that district and found all the excesses, but since those elections are being held, the election for commissioners are held like August, the first week in August, the amount of people who come out to that vote, where it's not advertised at all, well, that's the highest vacation time, the first 2 weeks in August, and that's when they have the elections. Virtually the only people who vote for those commissioners are the people who work for that district and their families. The same thing when they voted on buying that lot across the street. They had a 4-hour election time from 5 to 9, and they didn't even advertise it except in the paper at, with a 6-point font. So people didn't know about it, and the only people who came out to vote during that 4-hour term were the people who worked in that district. Meanwhile, that district had 90,000 registered voters, and less than 2% showed up. I think it was only like 700 people who showed up for the vote, which were all family members of the sanitary district workers, and most of the residents did not vote and did not even know the vote existed. So that's the problem with these special districts. There's not enough transparency. People aren't aware of these elections, and I advertise them on my site, but once again, I work on a $0 budget, so it's hard for me to get to tens of thousands of people.
With that vote also, it was friends of friends, that would call people. There was nothing, publicized or anything like that. Who was running, who wasn't running, who came off of the ballot, who went on the ballot, who was the write-in, and there's a lot of miscommunication on that, for the town of, for the sanitation. It's very, very important.
It's something that we can look into, auditing the district. Yes.
I'd like to commend you for your tax cutting effort. I hope that wasn't where you got injured on your finger. I have a question about the 311 now. If I'm in town of Hempstead, will my cell phone automatically go to the right 311?
Yeah, that's the way it's supposed to work.
Yeah.
We're starting early discussions with the PSC, the Public Service Commission, established so that, yes, when you're in the geographic boundary of the town of Hempstead, you dial 311, you get the town of Hempstead 311. But if you're in North Hempstead, which has a 311 already,
Okay,
and you dial 311, it would go to the town of North Hempstead.
So when will that be operational?
We're trying for the third quarter of next year.
Okay.
We're in an RFP process right now.
Okay, thank you.
Are we looking for a tax decrease come January, or is this,
This will be for the 2019 year.
so then we can possibly look for, when we get our tax bill, and in January, we might see a small reduction?
You might see, look, it's 1.88, it's not gonna be like, don't go out and buy a boat. But every little bit helps, and it's better than going up, right?
Right.
Yes.
Once again, thank you for coming, I appreciate it. With the budget, is it at the mercy of the board to vote your proposed budget? They can change it much like the legislature does, the county executive does. So all your good intentions might go down the tubes?
So, the way the budget process has historically worked in the town of Hempstead, I know Felix will correct me if I'm wrong, is that the supervisor, who's the CEO, prepares a budget, it's a tentative budget, they file it, and then they deliver it to the town board members, and then it just at that board meeting, they ripen it into the preliminary budget. That's what gets printed, it gets handed out to residents at the meeting, and that's what's voted on at the budget hearing. This year, at the last town board meeting, when I had the clerk deliver the budget officially to all the town council members, I will let you know that that meeting was on a Wednesday. I filed the budget on Friday. I had invited the council members all to be a part of the process in July. I said, please, if there's issues in your district that you feel need attention in the budget, let me know. If you have any questions, if you want to be involved in the process, let me know. 0 council people responded. Nobody. So they didn't get involved at all. It's not their job to get involved in the budget, but if they wanted to say something, if they wanted to know what was happening, my door is always open, and I encourage them to reach out to me. So when I filed the budget on the Friday with the clerk's office, I immediately sent a copy to every single council member and encouraged them, if you have any questions before the board meeting, let me know. And then I said, and if you want to talk about the budget, I reserved a whole day. I said, anytime, come in, we can meet and we can talk about it. I got no response to that. At the board meeting the following Wednesday, they took a step which I think has never been taken before, and they tabled the decision on whether my tentative budget could become the preliminary budget. And they called a special meeting to decide that issue. That meeting is going to be on Monday. It's a special meeting. The public is allowed to attend. The only issue will be that issue. That will be before the town board. So I don't know, that meeting is at 10:30. So then we'll see if my tentative budget becomes the preliminary budget. And then if it does in fact become the preliminary budget, they will probably try to make amendments or do things to the budget. I'm guessing at that meeting, but I don't know. I've actually reached out to them and said, did you have any concerns? They did send me a letter with some questions on some items, and we responded. I asked some of the council members, do you have any concerns? Are there anything other than those 6 items? And I haven't gotten any response about it. They're saying, oh, we're still reviewing it. I also want to let you know that they've also, the town board majority has also hired a private consultant. Instead of meeting with me or meeting with my finance director or the controller, they hired a private consultant to rip apart the budget. So that's an extra expense to taxpayers as well, instead of having a conversation about it. So that's going to happen on Monday. We'll decide if the tentative budget becomes the preliminary budget, and then on October 23rd, there is a budget here. There are 2 budget hearings. One's at 2 and one's at 7.
2:30.
2:30. Sorry. Thank you.
About Monday's meeting, and I sent you an email regarding this. I think because they haven't specified the details of the resolution, which they're required to. I know it's just a calling of a hearing, but they're calling a hearing on a resolution. They did not specify what that resolution is. When you called it, you had a preliminary budget online, which is required by law if the municipality has a high-speed website, which we do. They haven't specified what they're calling. So there's nothing online to say that what are we going to talk about, what are we calling? We don't have a concrete thing. We're calling a hearing on a budget, but what that budget is, we don't know. And I think that that meeting, the calling of that in that manner is illegal because it violates state law.
I do have an attorney looking at that as well.
Okay.
I will also let you know that I will be making, a tentative budget is tentative by nature. You always anticipate, we have pages intentionally left blank because we always anticipate that there will be some changes. I will have some amendments to our budget. For example, all of our EMTs that we have in the town of Hempstead, we decided that they would be more properly categorized under a different department. So we anticipated going forward in 2019, those employees would all be budgeted under a different department. But the department that was losing those employees didn't put them in their budget, and the commissioner who was gaining those employees didn't put them in their budget. We didn't realize that until after the tentative budget was filed. So I will be making an amendment to put all our EMT personnel back into the budget where they belong. We also, there's legislation requiring us to hire a compliance officer. We've been dealing with that process for quite some time, trying to narrow down the candidate that's going to be our compliance officer. The office doesn't yet exist, so during all our budget meetings, nobody said, oh, we need the $250,000 for the compliance officer. So that was not incorporated. It was an oversight. It was not incorporated into the budget. We expect that we'll hire a compliance officer in the next month or so, and then we will need the funds for that office. So that's another amendment that I'll be making to the budget. So we'll see what happens on Monday with respect to what the budget actually looks like. Yes, sir.
Thanks, Supervisor. The utility or settlements you mentioned, are those just for next year, or are those going to be for several years?
So the utility settlement, we are paying that off. We had to pay, I think, about $72 million, and we anticipate $10 million in interest that we're going to have to pay on that. So that is $8.2 million for the next 10 years.
Yes, earlier you made a statement about your predecessor. I think the number that you came up with was 190 jobs that was retained for your...
There were 190 personnel moves.
Personnel moves,
yes.
Yeah. And you said that 30 of them were maybe legitimate, or seemed
Yes.
like it was, but now you had 160. Was that problem ever resolved with the board?
So the board approved all those personnel moves. Some of those moves are subject to the litigation that I filed, say that they were improperly done because they weren't budgeted for, and it was an irrational decision to add $2 million of expense to payroll without having the money allocated to pay those employees. So, I don't know, did I answer your question?
Well, I guess the question is, were they put into vacant spots, or were those spots
Well,
created?
some of them were. There's so many of them. I have actually a chart of where everybody went. But for example, somebody who worked for the supervisor, was his director of communications, went into a vacant slot, which was confidential assistant to the receiver of taxes. The salary that was budgeted for that position was about, I think, 70 or 80. So, huh? $91,000. But this gentleman's salary is $205,000. So the receiver of taxes took in an employee for a $90,000 job and is paying a confidential assistant to the receiver of taxes $205,000.
So hypothetically, if this was within your administration, can you still, is that still allowable?
Well, I mean, he's there and he's protected now, so he cannot be terminated. Part of that.
I'm not just talking about his job, I'm talking about the other jobs that were done during that time.
They're all moved into protected positions. So we just absorb that cost.
So now the board just allowed that to happen, so
Yes.
that's the law now.
Yes.
So-
And allowed the greater concern for me is the amendment to the union contract, which is the broad no layoff clause. that says that the town cannot lay anybody off, even if our finances collapse, and we have and we're on the verge of bankruptcy. We can't consolidate any departments. We can't lay anybody off. That is something that I think was, I think that decision was arbitrary and capricious and done in bad faith at the end, at the prior supervisor's last town board meeting. So that's what I'm trying to undo in my lawsuit. So there's a lot of talk about like I'm suing council members individually and I want to hurt their families. That's all just hyperbole and ridiculous nonsense. I'm not trying to hurt anybody's family. I'm just trying to undo something that really hurts taxpayers. Because if we have an economic downturn and we need to find efficiencies in the town and we can't lay people off, the burden is going to be passed on to all of you. Yes, sir.
Actually, let's talk about snow removal, brings something to mind. I've lived on Dogwood Avenue for 35 years, I guess. The worst part about snow removal and snowstorms for me is the wall of ice that the snowplow fills in front of my house. And as I recall, when I was 35 years old, breaking up that iceberg was one issue. Somehow I find it's getting more and more difficult as time goes on. Especially since when I finally accomplish it, one day I'll just be trapped in my house and won't be able to get out at all. And when I finally accomplish breaking up this iceberg, I go next door to my 83-year-old neighbor who's stuck in his house, and I break it up. Maybe it's what happens to disabled people in a snowstorm? Do they just wait through spring and call people up for food or what?
We just had a question from a lady at the last seminar that I had this morning, or presentation that I had this morning. And there are various civic groups that come out and have organized brigades to come and shovel for people to try to help shovel their walks. You know, we as a town, we have to plow the streets, but if we agreed to shovel everybody's walk, that's like, that would be a burden.
Shoveling the walk is easy enough. It's the iceberg that I worry about.
What certainly helps in that instance is if people don't park on the street so that snowplows can get.
And where are they going
I
to
know
go?
it's very difficult, but that way it can cut down on the depth of that snow burn.
Well, just the one thing, when you do your 311, the biggest thing you need to do is to tell the people what road they live on, because that's not a town road, that's a county problem.
Oh.
That's the biggest issue. The majority of the people in the town don't know who to call for snow removal. You know, Dogwood Avenue, that's a county road, so that's a county problem. Town of Hempstead do the ancillary roads, your regular residential roads. The state handles Hempstead Turnpike. So it's a multitude of different agencies. The biggest problem is, I applaud having that said, because if somebody's going to call the 311, at least you can direct them to who to complain to. Because that's the biggest problem, because everyone will always blame the town, and I do as well, because, you know, it gets ridiculous, especially when you get plowed in. But you have to know who to complain to, and if you do the 311, please make sure that's part of it, so people know where to direct their complaint.
Excuse me, I had last year where I live on Cleveland Street in Franklin Square, and Park Avenue intersects me. Well, the snowplow came down Park, came right up, crossed Cleveland, and dumped it right in front of my driveway. And I had a nice, clear, beautiful driveway so I could get out, because I'm up early enough, and I could get out and everything. And I did call, they did send a payloader to clean it up. Meantime, the payloader got to the corner, dropped dead. A neighbor came out, boosted him, the payloader turned around and went and dumped him out. I went down the block and I screamed and yelled at my neighbor. Meantime, he works for Garden City.
The supervisor did mention that.
And my neighbor had to come and pick me up.
Get additional equipment, make sure our payload doesn't die.
And my neighbors had to come and then dig me out, so I'm up in there.
In an emergency situation, as I said, that night of the snowstorm, we're driving around all night long, looking to make sure snows were bad, watching Facebook. Although that is not a good means of communication, please. Like I said, I can't be getting my reports from Facebook. But I found out, again, on one of these posts, that there was a woman who was 9 months pregnant, and she was having to go to the hospital, and she was at the end of one of those dead ends, and so all the snow was in front of her house. She couldn't get out, and so I happened to see it on Facebook. So I sent a payload down. I knocked on her door. We dug her out. She saw that it was all clear. So if she needed to go to the hospital, she could go to the hospital.
We have another question about the financial budget.
Someone over there made a comment about,
About the financial budget.
no, I don't want that. You made a comment, or someone made a comment about we should park our cars somewhere else.
To the
So,
extent possible.
where are you supposed to park your car in Elmont? We have families with 6, 7, 5 cars. You can't get them in the driveway. You cannot get them in the driveway because of the stoop area. Where are they supposed to
I
park?
can't tell you where to park the cars. It's just we ask to the extent that you can. If you get
The
move
plowers
cars off of the street.
stink. They just lock you in and you can't come out for 3 days.
The plows could do a much better job if they're able to plow the width of the road. But when there are cars parked on both shoulders, on both sides of the road, the best they can do is they come down right the middle, and you're right, everything gets plowed right up onto those
So
cars.
there's something
Very-
that, thank you.
I think the bigger issue is there's so many, I think the bigger issue, there's so many illegal apartments. I mean, I don't know, maybe is it legal now to rent your basement, to rent every, you know?
No basement, no basement.
So that really has not been reinforced. And I know people have, complained about neighbors and whatever, but it seems to get.
I don't want to interrupt you, I'm sorry.
It just, people seem just to be able to get away with it. I think there's a lot of rules, especially in Elmont, that are not enforced. And then therefore, it just becomes there's tons of cars, nobody can find parking because of all the illegal basements. So sometimes you have to address the bigger issue.
There was an issue yesterday with a landscaper who had his car parked doing his job, and lo and behold, here comes the fire engine. Fire engine can't get through now.
Right.
Beep, 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 beep. And the poor house is on fire, and he's beep beeping.
So I think to address your issue about code enforcement, this is an illegal occupancy. This is an issue that comes up time and time again with the town. One of the problems that we have is we get an address, we send our code enforcement officers out to kind of visit the property, but if they come during the day, many times there's no one home or there's no cars, so there's no really indicia that there's overcrowding or something, an illegal situation going on. So if you're going to report a neighbor's house or a house where you think that there might be illegal occupancies, it would be helpful if not only you give us the address, but give us the time that you see the people home, so we can shift schedules. So if you know, like by 7 o'clock, everybody seems to be home and there seems to be like a bunch of cars there, so we can have a code enforcement officer go out at that time so they can actually find people home and really do the enforcement that they need to do. One of the areas of feedback that we've gotten a lot of during these presentations is about trying to make the town more proactive rather than just reactive in terms of code enforcement and in terms of some other public safety concerns. So it's something that we are going to take a look at. Right now we have an RFP out to bring in a consultant to do a complete top to bottom audit of our building department. A lot of concerns were brought to me about our building department, so we are in the process of selecting a consultant to come in to do that. We're hoping to totally revamp our building department, find new efficiencies, and find a better way that dealing with our building department can be more user-friendly, that we can expedite the process of getting permits. I mean, I just hear story after story after story about delays that seem like they shouldn't be happening. So we're going to try to streamline efficiencies there. And part of that, of course, is code enforcement. Look at ways we can have people do more proactive patrols of neighborhoods to look for issues like this. And with our highway department as well.
The town usually gets a phone call, and they'll never tell you who, and you really don't care. But say I rat him out, he has an illegal basement.
Right.
Okay, now this code enforcer comes and finds out the house has 4 or 5 cars. And they all come in at 6 o'clock p.m. What is the code enforcer do?
The code enforcement will
Say-
write them up with a citation, and, yeah.
Right, he'll be able to document by
Document
coming
it.
at that time, the violation. And he'll be able to cite them for it, and be able to start a case, and he'll be able to start a progression.
Do we have any more budget questions? We can talk about the,
Oh, yeah, I have a bunch of questions, but.
hold on, do you have a
Okay,
budget
go ahead.
question?
You want to still go ahead and pose it, Greg?
Yes.
Yes, hold on, this gentleman.
He has a budget question.
Okay, go on. You go first.
I'm tired of reading in the paper on people who retire. Let's say that make $130,000 a year. And they retire making $223,000 because they never used the sick day, they never used the vacation day, or any of the days that come to. When is that gonna end? I mean, shouldn't they, they get a lot of freebies, why do you have to take those days? You don't take the days, you don't get paid for them, that's all. But it's double, triple, like guys who work on the railroads, right? Guy makes 3 times what the boss makes.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense. And if he's the only one that can do the job, hire somebody else.
Right, listen, the confidential assistant to the receiver of taxes makes more than I do, so what can I tell you? That is a union contract obligation that we are required to pay because of the contract, and the contract was negotiated in July before I got there, but I think that this is a benefit that's been there for decades in the contract.
The next contract.
That's in 5 years, well, 4 years now, 4 more years.
Sometimes it'll help.
How about the contract we have with the police department? How long is that?
That's accounting, that's
Yeah, I
accounting.
know, but-
I think that's in negotiations right now, isn't it?
They're all in negotiations.
Yeah,
Well, one question to ask would be, why are they the highest paid police in the United States?
that is I don't have a police force, I have public safety force, but the police officers are county police officers. So, but that contract is up and being negotiated now, so I encourage you to reach out to your legislator, or to attend a meeting. Yes.
One more question on the budget.
No, it's all budget. Okay.
One more question.
But I'm gonna link it with what was said earlier. New York City has a software that they use to track what the building department does. All the permits, everything can be seen online. You could go to any address in the city, you could see any open items, any violations. If a building code enforcer said there was, illegal apartments, whatever it is, they could do that. So to make this into a budget question is, why can't we budget in next year's budget the software so we can do that in the town of Hempstead, so we could go on and look at addresses and see if that was reported as a zombie home, if that was reported as illegal apartments. Because right now we do have laws regarding zombie homes, we do have laws regarding vacant buildings, and it supposedly there's some database somewhere that we paid for, and it was passed in 2016, if I believe, but there's no way for the residents to see, was my neighbor's vacant house reported as a zombie home or not. So to budget that software into next year's budget would give us that capability and solve the building department issues and, at the same time.
I think that's a good point, and that's something certainly, Joe, take a note of it. When we're looking to revamp the whole building department, that would be part of that process.
Well, you could start with a blank database and start adding stuff in. Because you buy the software, it's going to be empty because you have no complaints or anything, and you start entering, you have a process by which the code enforcer, when he makes a complaint, he takes his little slip of paper or he uses a tablet, whatever method they want to do, and they enter the data into the system. Now you'll know that XYZ code enforcement officer wrote this house up because the grass was 2 feet high, whatever it is. And to talk about some more budget issues specifically that's in your budget, is there's a number of departments getting significant increases. Namely, the town attorney's office is going up from $3 million to $3.4 million. The information technology department is going up by a few $100,000, and the animal shelter is going from $3 million to $3.5 million. So the the controller's going up 400,000. There's a number of huge increases, and these are just on the salary level. This is not the overall budget. These are just salary levels. Why are there so many big increases in so many departments by salaries?
Comparing last year to this year, one of the main...
Last year to this year.
Yeah, comparing last year to this year, you recall there was a line in each of these budgets for less savings.
Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Nobody really knows.
Nobody knows what that is. That was the way
That they made up.
That was the way the previous administration and the budget, that's the way they reduced the number. And there was nothing supporting that number. So let's take the transaction goes to how much those less savings number.
Yeah, I have it here.
You'll have to add back.
Yeah, $500,000 less savings.
For which department?
For the town attorney with $554,000.
That now, if you add that number back, how does it compare?
Yeah, then it comes out about right.
Okay, that's the answer.
That's it.
We took the list.
We wanted to end the gimmicks. We don't want to pretend that we're doing better than we are, that payroll isn't really what it is. Less savings is a gimmick. I could say, oh look, we have 1845 full-time employees, but I'm guessing that maybe like 60 of them might retire. So I'm going to say, let's take that overall number and just reduce 10 million off it, because $10 million worth of salaries might retire. So then I give you a number in the budget that looks great, but it's not real. It's made up. So again, talking about the 2017 audit, that shows you that that less savings number is a joke. In 2017, they anticipated $13 million worth of savings in salaries. Guess what? So they took it off the budgeted number for payroll. You know what we had to do? We had to borrow $12.9 million to pay those people, because the less savings was just something to look good for you.
Just so you know, Chris Wright, a former NIFA member, complimented you on Facebook about getting rid of the last savings line.
Thank you, Chris Wright.
So less savings in last year's budget, just to put that in context, was $12 million.
Yeah, I also noticed that when they claimed savings from early retirements, and I had asked Kevin Conroy, do you add back the new hires and subtract that from your savings? He said no. So, I mean, the savings are one time, but they don't reflect when you get new hires. And they basically hired back all their savings.
All right, everybody. Felix, thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. I'm going to come over here, so I'll land some of your municipal needs.
Matt, on your
So handing your card to get any other issues, you can reach out to my office, Matt will give you his card, and we'll follow up with him. Thank you.